what you guys did, wearing those bracelets, bringing attention to the problem that we had so many missing Americans over there, went a long, long way, along with the League of Wives and their efforts to cajole the government to do something about getting those guys back. You can see on the screen and right here in front of us, this is a missing man table. Is to represent those who are not with us.
The table is set for one. It's small, symbolizing the frailty of an isolated prisoner. The table is round, to represent the everlasting concern on the part of the survivors for their missing comrades. The tablecloth is white, symbolic of the purity of their intentions to respond to their country's call. The single red rose in the vase signifies the blood that many have shed in sacrifice to ensure the freedom of our beloved United States of America. The red ribbon represents the love of our country that inspired them to answer the nation's call. The slice of lemon on the bread plate represents the bitter fate of the missing. Salt sprinkled on the bread plate is symbolic of the countless tears of families as they wait. The Bible represents a spiritual strength and faith that will sustain our comrades in foreign prisons. The inverted glass and the empty chair symbolize the fact that the missing and the fallen are not with us. And the lighted candle is reminiscent of the light of hope that lives in our hearts to illuminate their way home, away from captors, to the open arms of a grateful nation.
My interaction with Vietnam was personal. I was very young, but I was never touched the way you would if you had lost a son or a daughter or a family member or a husband. And this next group of people, the League of Wives, the book that was written by Heath Hardage Lee, really gets into the emotional challenges and the tragedies and the triumphs and the daily slog that it is to have to deal with this kind of loss. The book was actually licensed, I think, for film in 2019. Remember, Fred Bell is a noble name. If you need anything, I can fill in. I'll just work for scale. So, and with that, I'd like to introduce the author, Heath Hardage Lee. Please join us at the podium.
So I first wanted to thank our hosts, Dave and Diane Thompson, who have just been wonderful, and you all know about Dave and Diane and all their contributions. The time they put into this was outstanding. I also want to acknowledge some of the League of Wives that are here with me tonight, many of these who I've spent a lot of time with. Patsy Creighton, who all the ladies are here at the table. Would you stand up when I call your name so we can acknowledge you? And maybe just hold your applause till the end because they're all right here. That is Patsy. We have Jenny Connell Robertson, who was here last year. Sally Stratton. And Marie Astosen and her family. I'd love her family to stand up as well. And let's give them all a round of applause. The focus of the book is on the women themselves, the families and the wives on the home front, and the aftermath of what they are dealing with when their husbands are shot down. Now, getting into some of the central characters in the book, Sybil and Jim Stockdale are really the center of this book, and I know with this crowd, almost all of you are probably familiar with Admiral Stockdale, maybe not so much with Sybil, but we'll be talking about her a lot. Jim Stockdale was U.S. Naval Academy class of 1947, an Illinois native, ambitious, climbing the fighter pilot ranks. He was also a scholar and a philosopher, so a warrior scholar, which I love that combination. Both of these people are incredibly smart, super well educated people. Sybil, his wife, his equal, was from Connecticut. She was also extremely well educated, eventually would get a master's. She loved being mom to their 4 boys, a wife and a hostess. So we're in the mid-century, the kind of golden age for military wives between the Korean War and Vietnam. This idyll ends when Jim is shot down on September 9th, 1965. Sybil is the highest ranking Navy wife in Coronado, where she and Jim are stationed. So Sybil is the center of this story, and she is also the founder and the leader of the POW-MIA movement. There's always been some confusion for some reason about that, but Sybil is the one and only founder, but she has this wonderful League of Wives around her, supporting her and forming what will eventually become the National League of Families. Here we get to LBJ, who, if you read the book, you will see he is not my favorite person in the book for obvious reasons. Keep quiet was the policy of the government. For the families, once they knew about them being POW or MIA, they were not allowed to talk to anyone about this except immediate family. These wives so badly wanted to meet and talk with the government. LBJ and his government really shut them out, would not meet with them in groups, would not talk to them. They saw these women as a liability, not the asset that they would become in the next administration. The women realized this was the wrong call, and under Sybil and then other leadership, their movement spreads across the country and they eventually go public, and this changes the game for everyone. At first in Coronado, this is kind of really the birthplace of the POW-MIA movement, but this was where they all met, the San Diego area POW-MIA wives, met here first on October 7th, 1966, and they're all asking each other, are we wives or are we widows? Code secret letters to their husbands in the Henry Hilton and related prisons, and that was how they learned for sure that they were being tortured, as Jim's first letter to Sybil said, tortured in leg irons 16 hours a day. They already knew this, but this was further proof, and it just kept coming. And the wives got more and more proficient at coding, and this was a huge source of intelligence about what was going on in the prisons. Yet LBJ and Harriman still would not talk about torture or would not let these wives say anything about their husbands' scenarios. Fortunately for everyone, LBJ decides not to run for president in 1968. Richard Nixon wins. Ronald Reagan plays an important role as the governor of California. He urges Nixon, right, even before he becomes president and before the inauguration, you must listen to these women. So he's a big advocate for them. And he says to take this movement very seriously. Politically, of course, very aligned with, these are conservative military wives. This is a group he has a lot in common with. So there's a happy alignment of policy and the people involved. Sybil's diary, she had a wonderful quote in her diary that said, quote, dark, dark days in the Johnson administration, bright, sunny days under Nixon. So this is a side of Nixon I think a lot of people don't know, and it's one of the really great things he did as president. Now, there were others in this cavalry that supported the wives. Ross Perot, who Sally knew well she's from Dallas, and he was a huge supporter of the POW-MIA wives, flew them all over the world to confront the North Vietnamese in their embassies. Again, the tactic was to embarrass the North Vietnamese into compliance, to shame them, which really worked well. Now, Sybil, Phyllis Galante, Maureen Dunn, all here in the picture, they have been selected by the National League to represent them, May 15th, 1972. At this point, these women have power. They have been transformed from a liability to a huge asset. They are power brokers. They are lobbyists for their husbands. Finally, the war finally ends, January 27th of 1973. On February 15th of 1973, Jim Stockdale is finally reunited with Sybil and his family, their 4 boys, on the west coast at Miramar. On May 24th of 1973, President Nixon and Pat Nixon held the largest dinner ever to be held at the White House, even today, on the South Lawn. So the POWs and their guests made up the 1,300 people. They had dancing, they had a wonderful dinner. Movie stars came. John Wayne, who was a big supporter. Entertainers like Bob Hope, Sammy Davis. And the men gave him a plaque that said, "To Richard the Lionhearted, the one who got us out, the one who ended the war." Richard Nixon makes a toast, not to the returning POWs, but to their wives, mothers, and girlfriends. And the Nixon toast said, quote, "To the bravest and most courageous women I have ever met, gentlemen, to the First Ladies of America, the First Ladies." And that was the dedication of my book, because that's what they are.
There are 2 beautiful ladies sitting over there. And the first we'll talk about is, girls still there?
Yeah, we see them.
They are there. They're a little short, so I can't see them. Okay, I'm going to talk about Marie. Lieutenant Commander Mike Esposito from Turtle Lake, Pennsylvania, was a U.S. Navy A-4 Skyhawk pilot aboard the USS Ticonderoga. Went on a sand suppression mission in 1967. His aircraft was struck by an exploding sand missile, causing it to crash off the coast southeast of Haiphong after pressing home his attack in his heavily damaged plane. And although his remains have yet to be recovered, he is presumed to have been lost at sea. Next to Marie is Jenny. Lieutenant James J.G. Connell from Wilmington, Delaware, and a graduate of the Naval Academy, was also a Navy A-4 pilot, but aboard the Ranger when he was also on a sand suppression mission, shot down in North Vietnam and taken prisoner in 1966. While in captivity, he served as the main point of exchange of intelligence information with changing groups of POWs, resulting in severe mental and physical abuse and ultimately death at the hands of his captors. His remains were recovered in 1974 and returned home for burial at Fort Rosecrans National Cemetery in San Diego. A little about Jenny. Jenny Connell Robertson met James Connell between his 2nd and 3rd year at the Naval Academy. They were married right after his graduation in 1961. We received orders to NAS Lemoore in 1964. In December of 1965, JJ was deployed on the Ranger. Just 2 weeks before he was scheduled to return, he was shot down. We had a boy and a girl at the time. They were just 2 and 3. And I was 25. Jenny? I think all of us can say how sorry we are for your loss, and we're so grateful to have you here with us tonight. Thank you so much. And thank all of you.
You're watching KESQ, the Desert's news leader. This is News Channel 3 at 11.
Good evening, I'm Karen Devine. John White has the night off. Today, people all over the country are recognizing prisoners of war and those missing in action. The Palm Springs Air Museum hosted a special ceremony honoring the men and women who bravely served. News Channel 3's Lauren Coronado sat down with 2 prisoners of war and shares their story tonight.
Remembered at the inaugural POW and MIA recognition event at the Palm Springs Air Museum. Alongside Thomas is Tom Kirk, a POW for 5.5 years in a North Vietnam prison camp.
I'm shot down. I'm very badly injured. No one saw me get out. My family didn't know if I'm alive or dead, and I failed my country. That was what I felt. And I wanted to die. There's no question. I just wanted to die. Then one day, I stomped my foot on the ground, and I says, damn it, I'm here. I can't change it. I can't do a thing about it. Nobody cares. I've got to dig deep, and find the strength and the will and determination to hang on to whatever they do it, and someday I'm going home.
And he did in 1973. But that wasn't the case for some, like Jenny Connell's husband, James Connell, who was also a POW during the Vietnam War.
I knew when they shot him down, they released his picture and said, "We have this criminal," they called him. And I didn't know until the guys were released that he had died. It makes you realize what you're able to overcome.
We also remember those who are still classified as missing in action.
Lauren Coronado, News Channel 3.